This
They are
conference
many.
will now be recorded.
It's time to sell the advertising at that point. A very early necessity is choosing the cover photo, and I'll get into that a little bit in a minute. In January, I lay out and design the book using a program called Adobe InDesign. In February, assuming the book is all laid out, I get it out to the proofreader. I have several proofreaders because I believe the more eyes, the better. One proofreader knows nothing about Great Lakes shipping, and she's an excellent proofreader because she asks all sorts of questions that I assume people know the answers to. So we send the book to the printer about February 25th, and we get the book back on my front porch about March 20th. Around about in that time, mid-March, we're taking all the pre-orders you're so familiar with, coming through on the Fans of Know Your Ships page. Anyone that's bought a book from me in the last year on PayPal, they get an email that the new book is out. We promote it on the Boat Nerd website and all sorts of other social media. We take the orders, we contact stores, we print labels out, and all that is done prior to the book arriving. Once the book arrives in Ann Arbor, we start making trips to the post office, and the books go out to you, all the people who pre-ordered, to the stores who have ordered. And a note on the mailing this year, we've moved to using all priority and first class mail because it's much quicker. So the rest of the year, April through fall, basically it's selling the books, selling the books, selling the books, doing lectures, book signings, what have you, not last year, but coming up this year. Also ongoing, the people send me money, I have to enter it in QuickBooks, I have to put their checks in the bank, I have to think about next year's book, and of course there's the joy of taking the photos. Ooh. Talking a little bit about the cover choice. You can see a selection here. The 1959 first edition is at the left, and that's actually a very nice cover. One very important component of the cover is that it's got to be eye-catching. It's got to sit on a shelf at a store next to a lot of other products, and the book has got to stand out. So it has to be colorful, and it has to look like it has action. I really like a nice sunny day with puffy white cloud. If anyone has ever heard me speak, you know my obsession with the puffy white clouds. So take a look at these pictures. They're all very active. The one of the J.W. Westcott mailboat going past the American Mariner is the only time I've ever staged a cover. I was on the pilot boat here on Maid, and we had the Westcott run up alongside the American Mariner about 20 times to get the right angle, much to the confusion of the pilot house crew on the American Mariner, who called us on the radio and wanted to know what in the heck we were doing. The one on the far right, the Saginaw, is the first picture to grace the cover that was taken by a drone. Starting with the early part of the book here, one of the first things that I start to work on is this passages section of what's new since last year. One of the big stories on the lakes was the Cleveland Cliffs Company buying out Arcelor Middle. So that's there. The Interlake Maritime Services buying the Badger. That's on there. There's a mention of the American Steamship Company, the plan to charter the smaller vessels to Grand River. That's in there. So I have to keep updating this and keep an eye on it in case there's late breaking news. And another big event, of course, is the construction of the Mark W. Barker. And here's the keel laying ceremony and the floating of the hull section from the dry dock. Of course, we try and be a little newsy, a little up to date here. So on the right side, social distancing, COVID-19 masks, and the blow on fire. Fleet listings have to be updated. And the big challenge this year, this happens every year, gives Mr. KYS a headache and he loses more of his hair than he's already lost, was the movement of American Steamship Company's smaller vessels to Grand River navigation. there was only rumor. There was nothing official. There really has never, ever been anything official. I had my ear tuned to the boat nerd grapevine. I had spies who, well, friends, I'll call them friends, who worked for American Steamship Company. They were in the dark about what was happening. I couldn't get any comment from anybody. So finally, I decided that everything needed to go under the parent company, Rand Logistics. And then at the very last minute, I decided it sounded like it was going to happen. I switched those boats over. I took a little bit of a gamble, and it turned out that it worked out perfectly. The smaller boats did go to Grand River, so everything was correct when the book went to press. Another thing that has to be done is all the stacks and flags have to be updated. Now, here was the other nail biter. What was the stack on the former Arkle or middle boats, the Sykes and the Blot, going to look like? And the company wasn't really, they just didn't know. They said, I know the guy at the company, and he told me they just don't know. So I took an educated guess, not so educated as it turned out, that the logo would look like the one on the left at the bottom. And it didn't. It looks like the one on the right. So I really think the one on the left was more attractive, but hey, that's me. The image above that with the stacks and all the squiggles and the writing, what have you, that's what my graphic designer gets to work from, because he has to design all these stacks in Adobe Illustrator, which is not a skill I have, so he does those for me. Even though some of the information is the same every year, like this list of items here at the right, I try and change the pictures that go along with it and add a little information like the Westcott. And I just think that's a gorgeous view of what Silver Bay looks like, what a great harbor that is, and it's the best picture I've ever seen of it. The engine information has got to be updated with the new vessels and the ones that are leaving. So this is just a quick snapshot of this. I don't do this part myself. A gentleman in Ontario named George Wharton has done it for me for many years. One thing I might say is that I have several people who help out that are interested in various aspects of the industry. So I've got a guy that loves the tugboats, Isaac Pennock, and he takes care of all the tugboat listings for me. Matt Miner is really into the salties, so he does the salties. So yeah, I have a number of people who really help me with all these listings. Otherwise, it would be a nightmare. Now, the fun part, some of the fun stuff is getting to select the photos. Seriously, with the development of digital photography, I get more photos than I could use in 10 books every year. So it's really hard to pick, and I put some in and I take them out, and I'm always moving the things around. Here's just a couple. Again, you know, there's some action going on in these pictures. There's seagulls flying in the one on the right, big bow waves, a beautiful moon with a searchlight. Just some more photos. I wanted to say at this point, if you just ignore the fact there's a picture that I took in the upper left-hand corner, that I'm trying to get a lot of the younger marine photographers and the young boat nerds involved in the book and in this whole process. So the other three on the page were taken by the kids, teenagers, basically, early 20s. Another aspect of the book that has to be worked on every single year is the stories. Those of you who know me know that I spent 30 or more years in the newspaper business. I was a reporter and an editor and a designer and a photographer. And I love to tell stories. That's what being a newspaper man is all about. Just because I'm not doing that anymore for a newspaper doesn't mean I can't do it for Know Your Ships. At some point last year, people started asking me about what was up with those Viking shields on the Presque Isle. And I'm like, oh, there's a story people want to know. So I enlisted the help of Andrea Guerrero over in Sioux, Ontario, who knows the captain on that boat, and she wrote up the whole story about what's behind the Viking shields. I knew we were losing the Mississauga to scrap. or at least to withdraw from service in January. So we did a nice feature on the good old Mississauga. I'm trying to do this every year now. This is a little tribute to the sailors on the boats. The pictures come into me, or I see them on Facebook, and I reach out to the photographer and ask if I can use it and if I can get a high resolution image of it. And so here's this year's crop. The one in the lower right corner, there's Angelo D'Iranzo aboard the American Courage. I had his permission to use the picture, as I did with all these other people. And he actually ordered 10 books, and he wanted to send them to members of his family. I was proud to be able to do this story this year with the help of Jeff Cameron. Last year, we lost at least 5 or 6 of our major photographers and historians to cancer, to COVID, to disease. So I wanted to pay tribute to some of those guys and their pictures. Many of them, they've had pictures in Know Your Ships for years. They were good friends of mine, and I thought that this would be the way to do it. The book also has a historic gallery, so very popular with people. Picking those photos is also dealing with an embarrassment of riches. There are so many pictures to choose from that it's just kind of a daunting task, but one that I love. And I did the full page spread here because one thing that I try to do with the book, it concerns the advertising. I try to place the ads where they make sense. So historic ads go with the historic gallery. I want to mention one thing here too about ads. A few years ago, we started really pursuing advertising that was shipping related to help support the book. The advertising sales that are generated by my wonderful saleswoman, Catherine Lau. Maybe you're out there, Catherine? Thank you. They help pay for the printing and keeps the price of the book where it's been for 11 years. We haven't had to raise the price thanks to those advertisers. A couple of really great historic gallery pictures here. The 2 bottom ones are from the collection of Robert Zeleznik. He was a marine photographer in the Detroit area for probably most of his life. He died in the 1980s. And his daughter, Virginia, recently gave me his entire photo collection. So if you look at the left lower picture, you'll see the passenger ship Keewatin over in Sioux, Ontario. And behind the shed is her fleet mate, the Assiniboia. And the 2 people in there are Bob Zeleznik and his daughter, Virginia. Now, this is a 1959 photo. One of the most horrible things I hear sometimes is that a family has thrown away their dad's collection of pictures after the loved one passes away. And I just hate to hear about that because so much history is lost and someone's passion has been thrown into the garbage can. So I really enjoy being able to scan and present these older pictures. The upper right photo was from the Emery Massman collection. He was involved with the Marine Historical Society of Detroit, and we have many of his slide scans as well. I say we, I kind of blend the whole thing together. Yes, I publish Know Your Ships. I also am part of the Marine Historical Society of Detroit. This is an amazing image. The Cliffs Victory was pretty new when this picture was taken in the 50s, early 50s, by a captain on the Great Lakes whose last name was Pocott. And he worked for Cleveland Cliffs. He was captain of the Grand Island. And his son, Bob, is a good friend of mine. He's treasurer of the Marine Historical Society of Detroit, and he made his dad's slides available to us as well. I love this picture. This is from this year's Historic Gallery. The photo was taken in 1972, I believe, or 73. The Roger Blau was brand new, and the Edna G was the oldest operating steam tug on the Great Lakes at that time, or one of the oldest. She's 125 years old this year. So I love this meeting of the old and the new. Of course, I have to get back to work with things. Promotion is a big part of my job, calling on stores, sometimes in person, often over the phone, by email. This is Kay at the Das Gift House store in Sault Ste. Marie. She's probably one of my best salespeople in any store anywhere. She makes these signs. She really pushes the book for me, and I sure appreciate it. There's another thing here. It's now that COVID is on the wane, I get to go around and meet people in person and give presentations and book signings, and that's a really a fun part of this whole process. I love to meet everybody, and I love to meet the people in the stores, and I love just so great. There's so many good people in this whole process that I've met. So you can take the tentative off the top of that. I think all these are going to happen definitely in Port Huron on the 5th. I'll be signing books at the Maritime Center in Port Huron. The next day I'll be in Algonac giving a presentation to their Maritime Museum folks. It is open to the public. And I'll be talking about a trip I took a few years ago on the passenger ship Victory 2. Coming up in July, in Port Huron, it's going to be at the Convention Center. I don't have the exact details, but Streamtime Live is bringing me in. They're those people that have those really amazing webcams on the Detroit and St. Clair River. Finally, in November, if I make it across the UP, there'll be Gales of November, the annual program in Duluth. I'll be speaking at that as well. So, you know, it's a busy season for Mr. KYS. Oh, and there's some fun things here. You know, it's not all work. There's a little bit of play involved with this. I get to go out, chase freighters in my little speedboat, like I'm doing on the left. And I get to have people like Don Lee make a caricature of me with a boat coming out my ear, which probably explains a lot about my mental process. People have asked me, how soon do you start on the next book? Immediately is the response. The new book isn't even off the press yet when I have a folder that's all set, because things don't stop happening. People are taking pictures, I'm taking pictures, changes are coming in. So I've got the folders are all set up in my computer, the advertising, any changes in the listings go in that folder, the photos. You can see how I organize pictures. Pictures come in, and if they're a slam dunk, they've got to go in the book. They're so good pictures, they go in the best folder. Pictures that are possible for the cover, of course, the historic galleries, anything to do with the museum section, the passages section, the salties, stacks and flags, they're all in there. Vertical, you need vertical pictures for the pages where the titles are, like, you know, listings and passages, and so I put those in there. Photos to request, those are pictures I've seen on Facebook that have taken my fancy. So I've just made a copy of made a screenshot actually of the picture. And when the time comes to put the book together, I'll email the photographers and ask their permission and get a high resolution file for those photos. So it never stops. The work never stops. At this point, because some of you folks might be new to this, I want to tell you just briefly, I know other people have heard some of this, so it's going to be brief, a little bit of the history of Know Your Ships and how I got to be involved in it. The gentleman here that you see on the left is Tom Mance, Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. And he was a marine photographer here in town. He also was a machinist at the Edison hydroelectric plant. He started taking boat pictures in the 1950s, and his dad did the same thing before him at the Soo Locks. He worked for the famous A.E. Young photo studio here in the Soo. And A.E. Young was probably the granddaddy, forerunner of all of the boat nerds that are running around here today. Tom worked in this Edison powerhouse. I put a yellow dot at the end. His work area was in the upper story of the building overlooking the dock, which is the Sulak's Boat Tours dock. Out his window, he saw things like this. I can only imagine. In 1959, he created this little book to sell to the tourists in town and to the people that lived along the waterfront, so people could know the ships that pass our shores. That was kind of an advertising slogan back then: know the ships that pass the shores. The book was staple bound. It was only 44 pages. It sold for about 50 cents. To give you an idea of how long ago that was, the Edmund Fitzgerald was brand new that year. Classic Tom Mance photos. He was the first director of the Valley Camp Museum ship at the Sioux. In fact, he was the one that got the vessel from Republic Steel for the city. Here he is. He's in his element here on the boat, and he's also shown in the lower photo getting ready to take a picture down at Mission Point, just like we all still do today. After he retired, he was inaugurated into Great Lakes Hall of Fame at the Valley Camp. He passed away in 1995, and this is what the local newspaper said about him at the time, and I think that was very appropriate. He loved to talk about boats, and he also loved to fill the trunk of his car up full of books and go around the Great Lakes and sell, call on stores, and meet people. He was a very outgoing fella, and he could talk the paint off a fire hydrant. You know what I mean? When he passed away, he had set things up so that I could take the book over. And so anyway, I'll start with this picture. This is at Kemp's Coal Dock. That's the steam crane that used to be there that would put the coal on the freighters for fuel. Standing in that doorway is my grandfather, Bill Chown, and on the dock is a little kid who turns out to be me. And I spent a lot of time on the waterfront with my grandfather. We had a cottage down on the St. Mary's River, which is where I'm talking to you from today. I decided maybe I wanted to go work on the freighters. So Tom got me a job in the summer of 1973 when I had just gotten out of high school on the Ernest R. Breach for the Ford Motor Company fleet. I was the passenger porter, which meant I was basically the low man on the totem pole, cabin boy kind of guy who carried the passengers' luggage on and off and scrubbed their bathtubs out and what have you. We carried 8 passengers as guests of the Ford Motor Company. Well, I didn't wind up pursuing a career on the boats. I wound up going into journalism and newspapers. So instead of sailing about on the boats, apparently I just I wrote about them instead, which is kind of cool. So I worked at the Ann Arbor News for 30 years, and 10 years ago they closed. They went to web coverage, and I went to work for the web coverage company, and then they closed. So I took the hint, and I decided to devote all my time to doing Know Your Ships. What we did here, we did that. Okay, I'm putting this picture in here at the request of Michelle, who has asked me a number of times, what experiences stand out for you the most in all the years of doing Know Your Ships? Now this looks like a very normal picture, although the angle is unusual. I'm in the dry dock at Sturgeon Bay. That's the Edgar B. Spear, and the fellow standing underneath it is Dave Thompson, who was the Great Lakes Fleet port manager at Base Ship 15 years or so ago. And you know, it's a nice day. It had rained really hard the day before, and then it got super, super cold. And ice had formed on the back of the Edgar B. Spear on the hull. On this day, the sun was out and it was warming up. So I'm down here taking boat pictures, wearing my hard hat, lining pictures up, and all of a sudden, a big sheath of ice on the stern of the Spear let go and came crashing down inches from me. So I didn't take a picture of that because I was scared to death. A lot of things could have ended right there. including me and Know Your Ships. So very grateful that didn't happen. We all just looked at each other and we didn't say anything. And we went up to the galley and we had a cup of coffee and life went on. I've often been asked what is my favorite picture that I've ever had in Know Your Ships. And it's this photo of the Edward L. Ryerson, which also happens to be my favorite Great Lakes vessel. I took the picture on Memorial Day weekend in 1997, yes. And it was a beautiful day, and the Ryerson had just come back out into service, and I'm out here in my boat, and the captain comes out of the pilot house, and I thought he was going to yell at me for getting too close. I was ready for that. And the guy goes, "Hey, send me a picture." So I said, "Sure." I went to, I figured out, went to the trouble of finding out who the captain was. I had some prints made up. I sent them to the boat at the Marine Post Office. Email was new at that time, but I got an email from the captain, who turned out to be a name we all know pretty well if you're a boat nerd, Eric Treese. I didn't know that that was his first trip as the captain of the Edward L. Ryerson, and that's why he wanted pictures. I sent him the pictures, and he sent me a note back and said, "Where's your invoice?" And I told him I didn't want to charge him for it. I was just happy to see the boat back out. So that was the end of it for a while. Then I decided to put that picture on the cover of the book the next year. So I sent him another note, said I wanted to send him some books. And they weren't out yet. So he said, "Well, why don't you get the books to my mom, because she lives pretty close to you." I'm in Ann Arbor, and mom's in Belleville nearby. So I got a hold of this lady and arranged to meet her, and I gave her some books, and we hit it off. And I got to know her and Eric and her family. And I would say this is my favorite picture because it's a photo that changed my life. I was thrilled a few years later, the second time the Ryerson came back out to get a trip on it with Captain Eric and his mom and my buddy Matt Yoakum, who took this picture. I'm on the top of the pilot house of the Ryerson going across Lake Superior on a December afternoon. And if you've heard the movie line, "I'm on top of the world," I may not have been on top of the world, but I was on top of the Ryerson. That was good enough for me. So this is one of the most memorable days of my life. Right next to getting to blow the whistle. I felt like I had all the power of the world in my hand when I was blowing that thing. And the boat was shaking, I was shaking. It was wonderful. As I go around and as I do these presentations, I have a couple of frequently asked questions, so I'm just going to pop that part up here. Okay, why does that boat need paint? These boats look awful, so why don't they paint them? Well, for one thing, paint doesn't make any money. The second thing is that because of environmental regulations, you are no longer allowed to scrape and paint the boat while it's at a dock. Back in the older days, of course, in the spring, the crews would arrive to fit the boats out, and one of the things they do was they'd paint the boat while it was right there at the dock. Well, you can't do that anymore. Also, the size of the crews on the boats have been cut to the point where there's really not enough time for people to do this. So they can only paint the boats when they go into the dry dock for their 5 or 6 year mandatory Coast Guard inspections. When they do that, they have to put the boat in a tent to keep any spray or any paint chips or what have you from going into the water or into the environment. Why do some of these boats have so much smoke coming out? It's not smoke, it's steam. Many vessels, including the ones of the Interlake Steamship Company, have installed scrubbers in their exhaust systems to scrub out all of the harmful things that might damage the environment. So what you're seeing here is actually just steam. But it sure looks good watching that steam plume come up behind a freighter, kind of like years gone by. How good is the food on the boats? It's that good. Sunday night is traditionally steak night on the freighters. So here I am on the Wilfred Sykes having some steak and mashed potatoes. Another night on the Sykes, we're having chicken Alfredo with the grilled Brussels sprouts and probably a hunk of tenderloin there. No explanation is needed for the baked goods on the K.E. Barker. How can I get a ride on one of them there boats? Well, you really can't unless you know somebody or you win a raffle. Because of Know Your Ships, I am very lucky to know people on the ships and in the office that operates the ships. So I've been honored to have several freighter trips on the Sykes, which is where I am here, the Ryerson, the Stewart J. Court, the K. Barker, St. Mary's Challenger, the Maumee. So COVID has put a stop to that at the moment. They don't let anybody on board that's not crew. Hopefully that'll be lifted in the future, and Mr. KYS will be back out on the water again. So you want to be a sailor, do you? Okay, well, that's fine. You need two things. You need a merchant mariner's document that you get from the Coast Guard, and you need a TWIC card, Transportation Worker Identification Credential. Without a TWIC card, you can't go on the docks or on a boat without an escort. So where do I get Know Your Ships? This is very important for everyone to know. You can get it online at knowyourships.com, of course. Many gift shops. We have gift shops and outlets all around the lakes, US and Canada, from Duluth out to Montreal. So some of those are bookstores, some of those are hotels. I got a couple of restaurants. I got a couple of places where you can buy it next to the Worms and the bait shop. I've always enjoyed this kind of patchwork quilt of oddball outlets that we have. That makes it just a little bit more fun. So that brings to an end this part of the program. And now I can take questions from the audience.
Okay, Roger, while we give everybody a chance to enter their questions into the chat using that little cartoon talking bubble there at the upper right-hand side, I'm going to take the con again and once again review our visitor center status. Also, I'm going to, if I can get my computer to cooperate, I'm going to post a link to our survey. I'm actually, Tricia is on from Duluth. If Tricia could go ahead and post that link for the survey, I'm having a little bit of computer difficulties. Meanwhile, right now, the Duluth Visitor Center is closed, but they are staffing a table outdoors on Thursday through Sunday from 10 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. So you can ask your questions, get literature about the facility, and check on the boat schedule. They are also doing vessel arrival and departure announcements. They have a virtual tour available on the internet. There are cell phone tours available outdoors. At the Soo Locks, we are open from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. That's completely open, all the washrooms, the visitor center, the park, and the observation platforms. We have an online gift shop through PayPal, which I will also tell you Roger, who is one of our valued board members on the Soo Locks Visitor Center Association, runs. And we have online exhibits and information sheets available on our district webpage. And just a second, and I will get to the questions here. We have one from Angie. She is wanting to know, other than the 1998 Ryerson cover, what's your next favorite cover?
Well, I could cop out and say they're all my favorites, just like, like you say, all your kids are your favorites. But I think every time the Ryerson's been on the cover, which is several times, that's a favorite. I loved the 2005 cover that had the Alpina going into the MacArthur Lock. I got permission to go over into the control tower, and we took the screens out of a window, and I took pictures through the window. That was for the Soo Locks anniversary. issue that was 150 years of the Sulak, so I like that one a lot. And gosh, it's hard to say about the other ones, but there have been some really great covers over the years. The drone covers are awesome. Try not to make every picture a drone picture, but they're so eye-catching. The picture of the Stuart J. Court meeting the Mesabi miner in 2002, that was a pretty good cover also.
Do you have any insights on the return of the Sherwin or the Ryerson?
The Sherwin, I do not. The Ryerson, the rumor mill, bubbles constantly. It's bubbled up to a fever pitch again with the acquisition of the company by Cleveland Cliffs. There have been statements to the fact that it will come out in 2022. It's going to need some work, a lot of work in the shipyard for that to happen. Think if you haven't driven your car for 12 years or so, there's going to be a lot of things that are wrong with it. Well, then think again if it's a 1959 vintage steamboat. It's going to be a lot of work that has to be done. So what I will believe is when that boat goes into the shipyard, gets work done, I will believe it's going to come out. So I was encouraged when I heard that stack logos had been cut for the Ryerson, a Cliffs logo for the Ryerson, and also that the company HR department was asking crew members if they wanted to work on the Ryerson the following year. Well, who wouldn't, right? So anyway, nothing official, but that's the rumor mill that I'm hearing on that.
And while we're giving everyone else a chance to enter their questions, although I have to say your presentation, Roger, was so thorough that it's kind of hard to think of questions. Meanwhile, in the chat, I have posted the link to our online survey. It's only a few questions, takes about 3 minutes, helps us plan future programs in the Virtual Visitor Center. Also, I've posted the link to the YouTube channel where we post all of the Virtual Visitor Center programs. And we have a question from Michelle. What guidance do you have to those taking pictures to keep the history alive?
My guidance is to keep taking pictures, take lots of them, and organize them so that they are of use to people in the future. In other words, the name of the boat, the date of the picture, the location, and who took it. There's nothing more frustrating than seeing a great picture from 1952 or just a great picture from years ago and not knowing where, when, or who took it. It's, I think it's very important to give credit to the people who took the pictures. So that's very helpful in preserving the history. And if you have a loved one, dad, or what have you, that's really into this boat stuff, please, 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 when the time comes, do not throw the stuff away. Contact me at the Marine Historical Society of Detroit or somebody that does this kind of preservation and make sure these pictures don't get destroyed.
And I have to agree with Roger on that, especially the labeling the images. I spent most of my career, 15 years before I came to the Corps, in history museums, and we would have so many fantastic pictures, but we didn't know who the people were that were in them. We didn't know where the photos were taken, and that made them a lot less valuable and useful. If you label them, that's critical. And I will say too, though, there are some amazing ship whisperers out there. I send pictures to Roger all the time, and I'm always dazzled by how he's able to identify the tiniest little speck of a ship with just a few distinguishing characteristics available. We have another question here, which is what are the websites to watch the ships at the locks and the Lake Superior Marine Visitor Center in Minnesota? And if you don't know the answer to that, I do, Roger, but you go ahead.
Well, I'm going to start and then you can finish. Boatnerd.com. It's a great place to find out information about the boats. There's a daily news page on there. Boatnerd has an AIS system to track the boats. AIS at boatnerd.com. You can get their positions. And there's those great stream time live cameras on the St. Clair and Detroit rivers, which the quality of those is just superb and people just love to watch those, including me. And Michelle, do you want to talk about the Corps webcams?
Sure, we have a Sue Locks webcam, which you can get to through the Detroit District web page. There's a link to it there on the screen. When you click on Sue Locks over on the left-hand side, there's a link to our webcams. Unfortunately, for the hardcore boat nerds, which includes myself, our cameras are on a mandatory delay because the Sue Locks are critical infrastructure and the Army does not allow us to broadcast real-time images at the locks. However, there is a workaround. Channel 9 and 10 News has a live feed on the roof of a restaurant across the street from the Sue Locks. So you can watch boats in the upper approach in real time through that site. And then the Lake Superior Marine Museum Association sponsors a camera on top of the visitor center in Duluth, Minnesota, which also shows real-time images of ship traffic in the Duluth Ship Canal. And we have another question here, one that I've heard lots of other people asking too. Is the blow being repaired?
That, all I've heard on that right now is speculation. The company has not said anything about it. I understand from people that I know who work in the shipyard that the fire damaged area is being cleaned up. I've heard that it will be fixed. I've heard it won't be fixed. I heard it's going to be converted to a traditional style deck mounted self unloader. So I think what we have to do is wait until the company says what they're going to do. I sure hope so, because it's one of my favorite boats.
Mine too. And also Trisha has let me know a couple other cameras that I was not familiar with. There are also cameras for Superior, Two Harbors, and Silver Bay that are on DuluthHarborCam.com. I'll post a link to that in the chat in just a second. And then we had a comment. Vivian has a classmate's son who is on the PRT. It's, some people ask me, what's your favorite boat? A lot of times my favorite boat is the one where either I have been on it or people I know are on that boat. That usually makes them my favorite. And Keith has asked you, Roger, roughly how many pictures do you take and get per year for the next book?
First, just add on to what Michelle said. If you're watching these boats for a while, you really get to know them. You know who's on them, who's the captain. I sometimes tell people it's kind of like NASCAR, where you know the cars and the drivers and all that, and they really do become family. I've got the sickness bad because I've got a ship-to-shore radio on 24 hours a day, listening to the boats talk, and it's that's just kind of an interesting thing to observe. As far as how many pictures I get, a lot. In the photograph days, people would send me slides and prints, and I'd lay them all out on the bedspread in the spare bedroom and go, this one, yes, that one, no, what have you. I would say now, because of things being digital, it's over 1,000 pictures I get to go through every year. And it's fun. That's not a bad thing. The more the better. I feel, because I can't be everywhere in the Great Lakes and Seaway to get these pictures. So I appreciate all the folks from various places that do, and they send the pictures to me. And it's one way to make people feel involved in the book too, is if their pictures are in it. I have actually very few of my own pictures in the book because I want it to be more for everybody. And I want everybody to feel like they can contribute. I was noticing here on this list of questions here, is there any plans to republish the Decades book? A couple of years ago for our anniversary, I did put out a hardcover book called Decades, kind of covered the years of Know Your Ships, sold out in basically a hardcover. So I'll take this opportunity to say yes. We're not going to republish that exact book. We're going to do Decades 2. As you can imagine, a lot of great photos had to be left on the cutting room floor. I gave it a lot of thought about what else I could put into it, and the vision kind of came together in my head. So we're on our 62nd edition now. We'll be 65 years old in a few years, and I think that we would be looking for a Decades book to commemorate that event. So as they say, stay tuned on that. And also at the beginning of the program, I promised a big surprise at the end, a reveal. So I think I better do that before I forget. For the first time in the entire 62-year history of Know Your Ships, we have to go to a second printing. Business has been through the roof this year. And So we're going to run out of books. I'll be out of books by June 1st if I don't do another printing. That is just extraordinary. So we're going to do another printing, and we're going to do something that the founder, Tom Mance, used to do every now and again back in the 70s. We're going to print the book with a different cover. So there'll be a different boat picture on the front. For all you collectors out there, now you have both covers. That's a sneaky way of increasing sales. However, it's also kind of cool. So stay tuned for that. Those will be becoming available after the 1st of June. So just kind of an interesting year here for KYS.
We had a question from Joseph Lapp, and I'm going to take a crack at it, then I'm going to let Roger take a crack at it. Says he's a retired Navy commander and doesn't understand why the ships are referred to as boats. Boats can go on ships, ships can't go on boats. Now, when I was in graduate school, we learned it as it pertained to the Great Lakes, is that sailing ships were ships and steamboats were boats. And at that time, the sailing vessels were the largest, the steam ones were smaller. So it was a sailing ship and a steamboat. And eventually, as propulsion caught on and the steamboats got bigger and bigger and bigger and eventually superseded the sailboats, the name boats just stuck. So that's what I learned in graduate school, but I'm interested what the king of the boat nerds has for an explanation for why on the Great Lakes we call them boats.
Well, I would defer to the person with the graduate school. However, it's just local usage. Local being the Great Lakes. That's just how people have always called them. I mean, by rights, the name of the book should be Know Your Boats. But the founder did not name it that, and I couldn't see any good reason to change it, so it's still Know Your Ships. But hey, everybody on the lake, oh, I'm going to go see the boats. I'm going back to work on the boats. I'm going back to the boat. Pretty much never heard anything called I'm going back to the ship. So, I mean, even submarines are called boats by their crew. It depends on the local usage.
The other thing that might surprise our Navy commander is that on the Great Lakes, even on the biggest boats like the Paul R. Tregurtha, right in front of the wheelsman, it is labeled left and right, not port and starboard. The signs in the wheelsman's line of vision say left and right.
You could get confused very easily.
And Vivian asked if the presentation can be rewatched, and it can. I apologize. We've had a lot of technical issues, and I did not hit record right away, but we did record the program. We are recording it, and it will be posted to the link I just put in the chat within a week. And will the St. Clair ever sail again?
That would be a negative. My understanding is that it will eventually be scrapped once the insurance people are all done with it, and I think that's going to be sooner rather than later. The damage was just too extensive. It would cost way too much to fix it. The hull is twisted, and everything would have to be ripped out. So the twisted hull doesn't even make it suitable for a barge. So she is all done. I'm looking down this list of questions here. Will the John D. Leach, which is currently being repaired at Heddle Marine in Port Weller, will that sail again? Yes, I believe she will. I think they're working on it right now. And let's see, what's next here?
Rick is asking, yeah, go ahead.
Why are so many Great Lakes Fleet boats laid up? The John G. Munson will be out anytime now. They did some major work on the unloading system over the winter, so they're just finishing up on that work. Of course, we know the Roger Blau is fire damaged, so she's not sailing. The Philip R. Clark is in layup, and so is the Cation J. Callaway. My understanding is the Clark will come out, possibly come out, because you never know for sure, will possibly come out later this year. I'm also told that the Cation J. Callaway is retired. There's too much steel work that's needed. It's very expensive, and Great Lakes Fleet, its parent company, Canadian National, is not very interested in putting a lot of money into those old boats. Will there be pre-orders for the next reprint of 2021 KYS? No, we're not going to do pre-orders. We'll figure out a way to do that on our Fans of Know Your Ships page, where you can choose, but you'd only be able to choose from the standard bounds because the spiral bounds will be sold out, so you can only get the new cover on spiral bounds. Watch the Fans of Know Your Ships Facebook page is one place to look, and watch our official website, knowyourships.com, and it'll all be on there, and you'll be able to go from that point. How are the flags? Not state flags, those stickers, like the ones with the bear in the middle. I'm not quite sure what that question is.
I think Roger, they're referring to the fleet flags.
Okay.
But again, I guess I'm not sure exactly the question. If Vivian could clarify that.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I did post another link to the survey we have. We encourage everyone to go ahead and let us know how we did. Yes, fleet flags. How are they decided on?
I guess they're decided on by the company. They usually have the logo of the company on them, just much like the smokestack. And in many instances, they're pretty much the same. I guess the big decision is it a square flag, a pennant, or a dovetail pennant. But that's all decided on and at the corporate level, as is the name of the ship, what the boat's going to be named. That's all pretty much corporate as well.
And, Roger, I have a question for you. I have two questions. The first one is, other than from your boat in front of your cottage there on the St. Mary's River, where are some of your favorite places to get photos of boats? That and in addition to on board them in their dining rooms.
The stuff about being on boats and in the dining rooms falls under the category of research. My favorite place is to take boat pictures. Sault Ste. Marie, of course, which is where I am right now. Mission Point is the hallowed ground zero of boat nerd boat picture taking for many, many decades. And that's just a great place. I like Port Huron right under the Blue Water Bridge. The Welland Canal has always been special to me, although a lot of the great vantage points are fenced off now. Love being up in Duluth, getting pictures from the pier up there. So those are just some of my favorite spots. I guess it's kind of wherever the boats get really close. That's my favorite.
And then Angie was wanted to clarify. Did you say the second printing is going to be spiral bound only?
No, it'll be both standard
Okay.
and spiral bound.
Okay. And then my second question was, if you need a minion to, be a research assistant and carry camera gear, how would one apply for that job? And I mean me.
I know you got to be really nice. We already are. I would say there's a long list of minion applicants.
I bet that there are, because we all want your job.
I would absolutely love to take everybody with me on boats. It's just, I wish I could. I mean, they're not licensed to carry passengers, really. So you have to be a friend of somebody, friend of the company, friend of the captain, or whatever. So that's how I get on there, thanks to Know Your Ships. But I will have to say, that I've been one lucky boat nerd, that I've been able to do what I do. I live where I live. I get to meet great people all the time and mess around with boats and on boats, and there's nothing better than that. And I will say that the boats that I've been on, I have been welcomed completely by the crew. I have many, many friends on the crews of many of the boats now, and we stay in touch. Sometimes I wonder, well, gee, how are these guys gonna react to my shoving a camera in their face or whatever, or taking pictures of them? Hey, they react just fine. They're pretty much a bunch of hams. I kind of go on a boat and I kind of let people get used to me being there for a day. Then I get maybe a little closer into them and chat with them. And, hey, you mind if I take your picture? Turns out some of the pictures that I've taken of the sailors on the boats are their Facebook profile pictures now. So I just love every moment that I spend out on the water, whether it's on a big boat or my teeny tiny little motorboat.
And Rick is asking, where did you get your hat?
Oh, forgot which one I had on. I got the Edward L. Ryerson hat when the ship was sailing the last period of time. There's a guy in Milwaukee that designed hats for all of the Central Marine boats, and actually for a lot of the ships on the Great Lakes. And the guys on the boats would buy the hats with the ship name on them. And that's how I got this hat. Is I bought it from this guy's name is Doug Goodhue, and I don't think he's doing it anymore. But I got a Ryerson hat and a Sykes hat and what have you. If you're interested in interlake hats, you can buy those online at Force 5 Trading. You might see a little blanket over my shoulder here that's an interlake blanket. That Force 5 also sells those. And I'm just a sucker for swag. I love hats and shirts and what have you.
Okay, and I'm going to take a minute to back up again. We were frantically getting our graphics together, and we have the graphic for our next program now. This is going to be on June the 3rd, and beginning at 12:30 Eastern Time or 11:30 if you are in the Central Time Zone. The chief curator from Mackinac State Historic Parks is going to do a program about the shipwrecks that are in the Straits of Mackinac. As many of us familiar with maritime history know, that the Straits of Mackinac are they look pretty calm and sheltered, but they can be quite treacherous with shifting currents and heavy fog, and of course a lot of congestion, particularly in the 19th century in the age of sail. And there are quite a few really fascinating shipwrecks in that area, and Craig Wilson will be taking us on a little exploration of them in the Virtual Visitor Center on the first Thursday in June. And I'd like to thank everyone who stuck with us through all of our technical challenges. I will ask you, if you can, to please fill out the survey that I just put the link in there again. It helps us plan our future programs so we can do programs people are interested in and enjoy. And I'd like to thank Roger for his diligence and helping us tear through all those challenges and problems.
Thank you, everybody, for bearing with us on that. I'm kind of embarrassed. I'm doing these things all the time, these meetings, and this is the first one that just hasn't gone right. So next time we do something, we'll get it right from the beginning.
I think the lesson for me is to just insist on a practice.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good idea.
Because if those of us who were with us a few weeks ago remember, I had kind of the same kind of problem happen with Mark Gill from the U.S. Coast Guard. We had a last-minute failure and a scramble.
I want to let everybody know, too, that at 9 o'clock this morning, I decided to scrap the program I had and start over. So I was looking at 12:10.
You are out of your mind, Roger.
Yep, I know. So no one's ever seen what I just presented.
Well, that's excellent. And luckily we did record it.
Good, thank you. And thank you, everybody. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your support of Know Your Ships and your support of me. It means everything to me. As I talk about people's passions and their life's work, this is mine. So thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye. I see all those little icons winking out.
Goodbye.